Hello, and welcome to APUSHbyStrunc, the YouTube channel which hopefully will provide some answers to your questions in U.S. history. For those of you that are new to this channel, I've been making these videos for the last several years as supplements to my lectures in class. And so what I'm presenting here is information that will help you as you take what is known as the survey course of U.S. history, the broad overview. So I hope that this helps you learn something if you're in a class, whether it be in high school or college. I hope that I'm able to give you some good information and set you up so that you're ready for whatever it is your teacher is going to throw at you. If you're watching this because you're in my class, I am definitely going to throw something at you after you watch this video, so make sure you pay attention, take your notes. Let's go ahead and get started. This first video in this long-running series is about European exploration. So we are getting into U.S. history here in the 15th century. So where do we start U.S. history as we go through? You can pick any number of places to start. I like to start with the Crusades, the European attempts to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslim forces that had taken over beginning in the 600s. Right? Europe in the 11th century, you have the Catholic Church that's in charge, and around the year 1095, the Catholic Church says, trying to unify all of the different powers in Europe to give them one common goal, says we need to go and we need to reclaim the Holy Land from the Muslim forces. There are a large number of crusades. The summary is the first one kind of worked. The importance isn't the crusades. The importance isn't the reclaiming of the Holy Land. The importance is that these Europeans began to be introduced to goods that were coming from Asia. And I have the word introduction there in quotation marks because Europeans, if you want to go back into the world history aspect of it, they had access. They had encountered these goods from Asia, such as spices and silk and whatever else, through their history. When the Roman Empire collapsed, you had the European Dark Ages, and so they had lost the most important thing was the economic foundation that they needed in order to make it worth it for these merchants to bring that stuff to Europe. And so, that had kind of gone away. Well, when the Crusades happen, the Europeans, they go to the Holy Land and they have access again to some of these goods. And these are good. Why don't we have these? We want these. We want access to these. And so this is a good reintroduction, and it increases European demand for these goods. And as these goods arrived in Europe, more people got to experience them, more people demand them, and so it kind of feeds on itself. Another thing that goes really hand in hand with the European demand is the improved European economy. As they come out of the Dark Ages, they have more money. They have more money to spend. So here come the new spices. They're going to go to the highest bidder. Well, we have more people with more money, and so you as a merchant, you can make money. You go to get more spices, you bring them in, you go to get more exotic spices, so that the wealthy can get those exotic tastes. And so more money flowing through Europe, more demand for the goods from Asia. Another thing that helped lead to European exploration in the 15th century were the growth of the stronger central governments, what we start to think of as nation states, say like France or Spain, those countries. Once the Roman Empire collapsed, regions, provinces, somebody was able to kind of take charge and rule a little area. But now, as the Middle Ages are coming to an end, you have certain people who are gaining access to kind of a lot more money and power, and they're able to start dominating all of their neighbors. And so they're going to set themselves up as kings. And so the kings, with a desire to expand their political authority, with a desire to expand their economic authority, they're looking to increase their territorial holdings. And so they're going to start looking overseas, not just to increase their territorial holdings, but also to gain access to those Asian markets, not so they can sell anything there, but so that they can have the goods that hopefully they in turn can turn over to the rest of Europe, thereby getting more money. Another thing that I want to mention that's going to drive the different European powers to expand was something that's coming. It's coming in the 1500s, so it's coming a little bit after what we're talking about, but it is a motive later on, the Reformation. You have a movement to break away from what is seen as a corrupt Catholic Church, which has dominated Europe, and so you have these smaller groups that are starting to break off. And as rulers became members of these new denominations, I think Protestants, Catholics, and Protestants, there was, as part of this exploration, there was this motivation to, we have to get to these other people around the world because we have to convert them to our version of Christianity, because the other side over there, whoever it is, whether it's the Catholics or the Protestants, depending on your point of view, they're doing it wrong, they're committing heresy, and anybody that they convert is going to go to hell. We therefore have to get there first. Otherwise, they're going to be taken down this wrong path. And so that was another motive for the Europeans to expand. So who are these people in Europe that are involved in all this? We're actually going to start with Italy and the Italian city-states, specifically the two larger ones that are involved in trade, Venice and Genoa. Okay? All of the different Italian city-states, there's no such country as Europe. Excuse me. There's no such country as Italy at this time. Okay? They're the different city-states. So the city-states would occasionally go to war with each other. Venice and Genoa would occasionally go to war. Venice came out on top by the end. But what these city-states do is they send merchants, and they secured access to the trade routes that linked Europe and Asia. So my little map here, you see Genoa there in the red, Venice in the green, and you see the lines going back around over here to, say, the west, where they can, take stuff to Britain, to France, whatever. But they also link back over here to the Black Sea, to the coasts of what is now Turkey, to Egypt and the Middle East. Okay? These are going to be the points. These are the points where the Silk Road terminates. Okay? The Silk Road, if you remember, was the trade routes that connected Asia back with the Middle East and then over here to the Mediterranean. And since the merchants in Venice and Genoa established those links, they created a monopoly that gave Italy the entire economic control over European trade back with Asia. And so anybody in Europe, which is now getting its economy moving again and the economy is growing, if you want access to that stuff that's going to help show off your wealth, you have to buy it from the Italians. So European wealth is then flowing down into Italy. In Italy, that's where the Renaissance is going to start. Why does it start in Europe? Why didn't it start in France? Because the Italians are getting all the money, and the people that are getting the money are turning around and paying artists to commemorate them. And so that's why Italy has all these amazing works of art that are produced right around this time. Now, if you're one of the other European countries, you would prefer to be keeping that money in-house. You'd really prefer for the other Europeans to be paying you, especially not paying the Italians. So the other Europeans, because the Italians have a monopoly, the other Europeans are going to be looking for a way to gain their own access to Asia, to these trade goods. kind of the first country to get in on this Asian trade is going to be Portugal. Portugal, we think, maybe geographically isn't that large, but in the 1400s, Portugal was a large naval power because of this man, Prince Henry the Navigator. Okay? We call him Prince Henry because he's never going to be king. His father was king. His older brother then became king eventually, but they both gave him access to the wealth that the royal family had that he would use to encourage technological improvements in sailing. He would invest in inventors and people who, their whole thing was we can create a better compass, a better sail, a better ship design. He believed that it was important for Portugal to have kind of the latest and greatest sailing technology to become a naval power. He also supported and pushed for Portuguese exploration along the coast of Africa. There became this belief, starting in the early 1400s, that you could reach Asia by sailing around Africa. The problem from the Europeans' point of view here is first of all, there was a myth that the center of the earth was so hot you could not survive. You think of, the Europeans who might have tried to explore crossing the Sahara Desert who were never heard from again. Now you think of the sailors, as you move toward the equator, it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And so they thought, there was a myth, that you could only go so far south. Well, he pushed them to keep going, to keep exploring. Well, in 1488, a Portuguese sailor named Bartolomé Dias, he pushes the boundaries of what the Portuguese know, and he becomes the first European sailor to round what becomes known as the Cape of Good Hope. Right? They didn't know how, once you read past the equator, how far south does Africa go? And so he finds it. And once he found the Cape of Good Hope, the Portuguese, they had good hope that they would now have the ability to access Asia. Okay? They're not going to do it right then. They're going to wait several years, but they know they can do it. In 1497, a man named Vasco da Gama leaves Portugal, rounds the Cape of Good Hope, comes in on the east side of Africa, and then sails to India. Okay? And so Portugal now has the ability to trade in Asia. They have broken into the Indian Ocean. They have access to that trade. Now, Spain is what's important to us as far as U.S. history goes. Okay? Spain in the 1400s is not Spain. It is not unified. Spain is made up of all these different provinces and regions, each one being led by someone who is powerful within their own little region and don't necessarily like each other. There's infighting. Well, in 1469, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, they get married. Not because they love each other, but because Aragon and Castile are the two wealthiest, most powerful provinces in Spain, and they realized that if they were able to combine their forces, they would be able to dominate the other Spanish nobles around them. And so after they get married, they go to their noble neighbors and they say, we want to be king and queen of Spain, and we want you to pay taxes to us. And when the nobles said no, Ferdinand and Isabella went to war with them. Some of the nobles would say yes, and so they would join forces with what they knew was going to be the winning side, but whatever. After they get married, Ferdinand and Isabella go to war to unify northern Spain. Get everybody in the same house, focused on the same goal. Once they unify northern Spain, they're then going to embark on finishing this thing that is called the Reconquista. The word Reconquista means to reconquer. Spain, hundreds of years before, had been invaded and at one point completely taken over by the Moors, North African Muslims who had crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain. And slowly but surely, over the last couple hundred years, the Spanish have been forcing them back south and forcing them out. By the time Ferdinand and Isabella unify northern Spain, the only thing that is left of the Muslim lands is going to be Grenada, or Granada, however you prefer to pronounce it. And so Ferdinand and Isabella now go to war there, and they finally conquer Grenada, and they finish the Reconquista and all the wars in Spain in January of 1492. This then sets the stage for Christopher Columbus. Columbus, as you probably already know, he's Italian. He's an Italian sailor, and he has been going around Europe looking for someone to back his voyage west. He believes he knows an all-water route to Asia. If we sail west, we will go around the globe and we will reach Asia. Columbus is not able to find anybody who wants to take him up on this offer. Okay? He is rejected multiple times. He's rejected for multiple reasons. Okay? He goes to the Italians and says, hey, guys, I've got another idea. They reject him because they already have the monopoly. They don't need him. He goes to Portugal. He arrives in Portugal after Portugal has found the Cape of Good Hope. They don't want him because we've already found our way. Most people reject him because in 1492, there was an accepted size of the world. The accepted size of the world had been calculated many hundreds of years before by a guy named Ptolemy, who, using a stick, a ruler, and math, calculated the size of the world to within 200 miles of what it actually is. We were able to prove that in the 1960s and 70s with the invention of satellites that were able to measure the globe. But that was the accepted size of the world. Everybody knew the world was round. It's a myth that, they were afraid that he was going to sail off there and fall off the edge of the earth. That's a myth. There's no such thing as the flat earth. That's a free one. Okay? But Columbus has done different math. And in his version of math, the earth was only about 1/3 of the size it actually is. Okay, everybody in Europe, their problem, you can't sail west. Their problem was we don't have any ships large enough to carry enough food and fresh water to reach Asia. They will get out there in the middle of the ocean and you'll die. Well, when Columbus mistakenly shrinks the earth, he says, well, no, that's not a problem. It's right over there. We have the ships. In 1492, when the Reconquista is over, Ferdinand and Isabella, they have money that they have budgeted for fighting the war. The war's over. They have money left over. What do they have to lose? And Columbus goes to them and makes that argument. What do you have to lose? There's another myth out there that Isabella was the one that believed him and she pawns the crown jewels to give him the money. That's not true either. This was financed by Ferdinand and Isabella. They knew what they were getting into. Worst that can happen is he goes out there and, yeah, sure, everybody dies. And so they finally back him. In August of 1492, after outfitting his ships, he leaves with the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, headed west, hoping to reach Asia. The journey goes on for a number of weeks. The crew was starting to get a little concerned because they've been going west and we haven't found land yet. And, we were kind of shaky on this guy and his math before. We're really kind of worried now. We're going to get to this point where we're going to run out of food. But before they mutiny on October 12th, 1492, they sight land, the island of what Columbus calls San Salvador. Which island in the Caribbean is the one Columbus actually landed on the first time? Who knows? There's a whole lot of islands down in there. If you take a Caribbean vacation, they will all tell you this site is where Columbus first set foot on the New World. But whatever, Columbus arrives in the Americas, what we know now as the Americas. He's greeted by the Native Americans. He thinks he's in India, and so he calls them Indians. But he's greeted by this group specifically called the Taino, hoping that's how you pronounce it. Columbus, by the end, is going to end up making a grand total of 4 trips back over here. And Columbus is never convinced that he found anything other than Asia. The closest he ever comes to saying this was something different was toward the end of his life. He was trying to get financing for a 5th voyage, and as he's writing one of these people he's trying to get the money from, he says something to the effect of, well, if this really is something other than Asia, shouldn't the person who discovered it be the one to go and explore it? But he never believed that. He died thinking he found the all-water route to Asia. It's up to other people to show up, explore, and make the determination that this is indeed something else. It doesn't take that long. Okay? There are plenty of people that come over and look at this. There's Columbus's 4 voyages. Okay, you have other people who explore up here into North America. You're going to have others that explore down here into South America. Okay? But it's others that are going to make that determination. One of the most important people is a guy named Amerigo Vespucci. He's another Italian guy. He's another Italian guy actually working for the Spanish. And he comes over to help the Spanish in their claims and to help map. He's also a trained cartographer, and he takes very detailed notes and makes sketches of the coastline of the Caribbean and the Americas. And it's his notes and his sketches that demonstrate, that prove this is something other than Asia. This is this thing called the Waldseemüller map. The Waldseemüller map is created in 1507, and it is sometimes referred to as America's birth certificate. It was supposed to take the knowledge of all the shapes and sizes of the known world and put them together in one giant map. And this over here was created using Vespucci's and some other people's notes. But this guy, Waldseemüller, who is the one that drew this official map, on it, he named these areas the Americas, North and South America. And here, in one of these text boxes, Waldseemüller wrote, I have named this America in honor of this man, Amerigo Vespucci, who has discovered the new continent. A couple of years later, Waldseemüller is going to go back. He's going to do another map, this one of a kind of Florida and the Caribbean, and he doesn't refer to it as the Americas. He refers to it as Terra Nova, New Earth. And he put a little note in that one saying, people who saw my last map may remember I called it America. I'm calling it Terra Nova now because I just heard there's this dude named Columbus who might have actually been the first guy to discover it. So before we decide whether or not we're going to call it America after Vespucci or Columbia after Columbus, we need to investigate that. But it was too late. The name had already stuck. And so this is why we're Americans, not Colombians. That's a free little joke for you if you want it. Okay? If you want to go see a copy of the Waldseemüller map, there is one original, intact, full thing on display in the Library of Congress. According to them, it's the only complete set left. And it's kind of an interesting thing to sit in the presence of this thing where that's the first time the word America was used, if you're into history like I am. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too long. I hope you check out some of my other videos if you're looking for stuff. I know I don't have a complete set. That's the goal for one of these days. But, I also work for a living. So I got to do that. Y'all have a good evening.